This is Mark's Musings, and we are here at WCTV.org in Wilmington, Massachusetts. And we're very happy today to have a guest with us by the name of Renee Mulhare, who goes by the name R.C. Mulhare. She has written various short stories that appear as standalone books and also as anthologies and with other writers, and they're all available on Amazon.com. Welcome, Renee.
Oh, thanks for having me here.
Well, it's nice to have you, I guess, on this cold winter night, but we'll survive here.
Good night for ghost stories.
Oh,
you already got a chill in your spine.
That sounds terrific.
Yeah.
I met Renee at an author fair at the Tewksbury Library, and she has also appeared as a guest speaker for the writers group at the Wilmington Memorial Library, for which I'm also a member. Her stories are quite unique, intriguing, mysterious, suspenseful. I think you might place her writing in the horror or supernatural genre.
That's a good way to put it.
A word to describe her writing is eldritch, which means uncanny, unearthly, a weird, supernatural way. Anything a witch does is eldritch. Goblins and elves are eldritch creatures. A story full of ghosts and strange monsters is full of eldritch elements. Is that about what?
That's a perfect way to describe it.
That sounds great. And so we're looking forward to hearing some of your ghost stories tonight. So tell us, the audience, a little bit about your writing style.
Well, I consider myself to be, I've described my writing as supernatural thrillers, sort of the horror of the ordinary, because what I will do is I will take people that are just perfectly ordinary characters, just regular people going about their business, and something in their world takes, a little turn to the right or the left or just up or down, and they find out that the world is a little stranger than they thought it was when they started their ordinary day of, just going about their business, filing paperwork or having a rough time having a vacation that was supposed to be restful, but takes a weird turn for the unexpected. So
that sounds great. So an element enters their lives, and all of a sudden there's a twist in there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. So when did you, at what age did you decide that you liked ghost stories? Or
I think I always liked, I wasn't much into horror as a kid, but I liked spooky stuff. One of my favorite fairy tales when I was a kid growing up was the Brothers Grimm story, The Youth Who Could Neither Shiver Nor Shake.
Oh boy.
Which is about this young man who, like the title says, doesn't know how to be scared. So he goes into the world, instead of trying to seek his fortune, he's trying to find out what's it like to be afraid. So he goes into a creepy castle full of all kinds of strange things happening, and he's like, oh, this is interesting. Okay, there's, demon dogs running around. Oh, nice doggies, and it's just totally wacky.
So he doesn't know how to
He doesn't know how to be scared, and, this is what he's looking for, and it's just one of the craziest stories that I've ever read, so it kind of...
So that got you started.
That got me started, really. I mean, I was about 8 or 9 when my mother read that aloud to me, plus she was also reading Edgar Allan Poe poems to me, and, things of that nature, and my dad is kind of a crazy Irish storyteller type who's always talking about funny people or just strange things that have happened to him when he's out and about working. So,
Sure.
So that kind of got me into, hit the microphone.
So you had that kind of a background.
Exactly. So that just got me into,
influencing you. Yes.
Yeah, regular people having very irregular encounters. So
when did you start to write any stories at that age, or did it take a little longer to?
I really started writing, I think I was about 10 or 11. I started jotting down sort of rudimentary, I would say rudimentary, but just, they were kind of funny talking animal stories. Like it was a hotel full of these eccentric animals and their strange adventures. Yeah. And that was kind of where I got started, and it sort of ebbed and flowed. I kind of was writing fantasy in a Tolkien type vein when I was in my later teens. I tried writing an epic poem based on the legends of the Holy Grail from the King Arthur legendarium, and which is a completely different tangent than you'd expect from,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
but it kind of got me into just sort of finding out that the world is, very strange because, here you've got this quest for this magic cup that has all this supernatural strangeness about it. But, these knights that you're looking for it are just, they're regular, ordinary knights that, are just taking, finding out that the world is a little stranger because there's this magic cup out there,
Yeah, sure.
So,
Did you write in high school, or did you have a writing course there, or did you?
I wrote some small short stories for, we were, I was basically home taught, for all the grades that I,
Okay.
all my school grades, and even did a little college at home. So I kind of was a bit guided by my mother who was teaching me, but I was also kind of self-guided. So I kind of was writing,
sure,
little bits and pieces and odds and ends as I was going along. But it wasn't until I got older that I really started thinking, hey, I could do this for publication. And I had a couple friends that were sort of pushing me in that direction. And I was thinking, well, maybe I could write fantasy, maybe I could write science fiction, because I got into science fiction when I was college level. But the kind of science fiction I was writing was sort of, 5 minutes into the future, as opposed to, space travel in the year 3000 or something. So, but I was finding that the technology kept catching up with the kind of stories that I was writing, so that was a little disheartening, and I was like, okay, where am I going to go with this? Because I've always been into sort of speculative type stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got in with a group called the New England Horror Writers. They more or less found me through an event that was at the Tewksbury Public Library.
Oh,
and
nice. Yeah.
I was listening to them, hearing their stories, talking with them, chatting with them, and it kind of crossed my mind, the science might catch up with the fiction in science fiction, and fantasy kind of comes and goes. And at the time, there was a whole sort of, there was a lot of Harry Potter's type stuff being written, and that kind of wasn't. Not that I admire J.K. Rowling and what she did. I just couldn't write in that sort of vein because I just felt it just wasn't, I just wasn't the right fit for it.
Now, this horror group, was it all ages in this group, or is it just more?
They're pretty much the gamut from, there's a couple people that are college age up to people that are, much older, and, the kind of people that grew up, watching the Twilight Zone on television when they were kids. So.
And they have meetings periodically?
Not so much meetings. We do get together for book sales and other events. So it's kind of a loose-knit kind of guild of writers.
How do they communicate?
Mostly online, mostly through Facebook, emails. We chat back and forth,
So you got some encouragement through them.
More or less. There was one guy in particular, I was talking with him, and he said to me, well, how long have you been writing? And I said, well, I've pretty much been writing off and on since I was a kid. And he says, well, what do you do for work? And I said, well, I work retail, and it takes a lot of my time, so I don't necessarily have the time and energy to publish. And he says, well, how long have you worked retail? And I said, well, I've worked retail for 13 years. And he looks me in the eye and he says, if you can work retail for 13 years, you can get published. And that was the light that went on in my head, and I was like, why not?
Yeah.
Even if it is writing horror with these folks. I mean, people are always going to be scared.
I mean, you stuck to something. That's what he was talking about.
Exactly. I had stuck with it, and I had the ability to stick with something. And considering the ups and downs that you have working retail, that gives you the thick skin that you need in order to get published, because you are going to get rejected. I mean, the very first thing that I sent out trying to get published, it got rejected, and I just looked at it as it's a rite of passage.
They say that about a lot of writers, that they get rejected a million times, and then there's that one time that they finally get noticed.
Exactly. It's you just got to get your story in front of that right editor and that right audience, then click. You're in.
Sounds great. Now, you wrote some short stories, and then you submitted them to a group so that you could put together an anthology, or is that?
It's usually how it works. I mean, usually there'll be some open calls that editors will put out. Hey, we're looking for ghost stories. Hey, we're looking for Christmas stories with a dark twist to them. Hey, we're looking for stories inspired by Robert W. Chambers' the King in Yellow stories.
Yes.
So, and they'll give you generally maybe not a seed, but it's like, okay, we're looking for this particular kind of horror story, this particular kind of supernatural thriller. We need X amount, stories of X amount of words. Let's see what you got. So I'll usually what happens is either I'll have something that might be a good fit, which I've already written just for funsies, or the editor will put out a prompt saying, okay, we need poetry inspired by the history of Salem.
Oh yes.
And that gives you a seed for something to write, and take it from there. And I'd say it's about 75-25, like about 75% of the things I've written have been from editors putting seeds out there that, to plant, an idea in their potential writers' heads. So,
one of the stories that I read recently that you wrote was the group of characters went to Salem during a Halloween trip, and so they went into the cemetery. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh boy, Thing in the Graveyard. That has an interesting history. Now, what happens is, because I work retail, it gets crazy around Christmas, so I will take the month of December off from trying to get published, because I just don't have the time or the energy or the wherewithal to do it. So it was January, and I was trying to get back on the horse, as it were, and I just started doodling a story, and what I did was it was an unused idea from this sort of notebook that the author H.P. Lovecraft had left behind when he passed away. It was all these unused story ideas that he had passed on to a friend, and that friend had sort of shared it with the world, saying, hey, here's all these stories that Howard just didn't live to write. Let's see if we can write them. So, and there was one, it was something about people seeing a guy in an antique suit of some kind in a public place, and they chat with him, and then they pass him on, and then they meet him later in a graveyard.
Oh, yes, yes.
So then I was thinking, okay, what can I do with this? And I was thinking, let's do a graveyard in Salem at Halloween. And I started writing it, and I was going through the listings on this one sort of little blog that's out there, horrortree.com, which is sort of a clearinghouse for open calls for horror and dark fantasy type markets that are looking for potential people to write for them. And there was one that was from a group called Fun Dead Publications, which was based out of Salem, and they were looking for stories set in Salem. So I thought, hey, I got the perfect story for these people. So I polished up the story, sent it off to them, and said, this might be what they're looking for. And sure enough, about 3 weeks later, I got a reply back saying, hey, this story is great. We'd love to publish it. And I'm like,
wow,
thank you. This is great. So that's kind of developed into a relationship that I have with Fun Dead. I've written 3 more stories for them since then, and they've become very good friends of mine. And I've done book readings with them. I've done other events with them. It's just been a fun, Fun Dead experience. I mean, they're very nice people. Amber Newbury and her co-editor Laurie Moran. They're just if you're looking for a horror publisher to work with, they're a good place to start with, because they're very, very down to earth, very kind people.
Wow,
so.
wow.
Yeah.
Now, when you publish a book, a standalone book, do you self-publish mostly, or is it you're looking for someone?
Currently, at the moment, I'm working on a small series that I'm publishing through Off the Beaten Path Press, which is a small press that a friend of mine in the New England Horror Writers, Carrie Daniels, is managing, and the series has been sort of taking small events in the life of H.P. Lovecraft and sort of playing with them and expanding on, maybe the weird things that he wrote about were actual weird things that he saw, and this is what inspired him to write all those strange stories of eldritch creatures, so.
Yeah.
Because the man had a very dark, rather tragic life, but he also has this incredible imagination where you feel like the things that his characters are seeing, these are really, really weird things that they have stumbled across, and
you feel like you were there.
You feel like you're there. I mean, one story of his that kind of got to me in a good way. The Rats in the Walls. I mean, I was sitting in my room reading it, and it was late at night, and all of a sudden I hear scratching in the wall, and I just jumped out of my seat, and I'm like, this is what it means to be a horror writer.
Yeah.
If you can do that, if you can trigger something, in a way that your reader comes upon something mundane that you've kind of turned on its head to make it creepier, and they come across that, and then they jump. That's when you really when the reader steps away from the book and the shadows are still lingering in the back of their head. That's when you've made it.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now you've mentioned Lovecraft quite often here.
Yeah.
Now he must be your inspiration. For
one of my inspirations, but I would say kind of my main inspiration, because I don't know if this was deliberate on his part, but he leaves these sort of unanswered questions in his stories, and I like to kind of play with those unanswered questions. Maybe not try to completely answer them, but just try and expand on them a little bit, and just take them from a different angle. So
wow, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And now, what about this group that you belong to? They meet periodically. Like, I think you were at a group meeting one time when I saw you. You were going to Salem to meet your group.
That was we do a book sale during Haunted Happenings. Usually it's the last weekend in October, and it's because Salem has this wonderful outdoor bazaar of the bazaar, as it were. So we're down there usually in Derby Square that Saturday and Sunday selling our books, and chatting with the crowds, and just mingling with the folks that are down there to have a good spooky time. So
now, do you all wear costumes that are related to the horror scene?
Some of us do. Some of us are just the kind of regular guy or gal wearing some kind of horror-related T-shirt. Some of us are kind of the more gothic types.
Okay.
There is one lady who does costume regularly as a Victorian witch.
Yes.
She's kind of one of those, kind of a Ren Fair type person. Very interesting lady, Trisha Woolridge. So
you had some success. You told me that you on one rainy day you didn't sell too much at all, and then the next day it was sunny, and all of a sudden you were selling some of your books like
left
crazy.
and right. Yeah, that was crazy. That was this past year. We went Saturday, and despite that rainstorm, a friend of ours had managed to score us a nice dry corner in the mall that's across from the Peabody Essex Museum. Essex Peabody? Where did I get that?
Peabody Essex.
Peabody Essex. Anyway, but we had a nice dry corner that we were parked in, and we didn't do too well because we were over in the corner and people couldn't find us. But then the next day it was beautiful and sunny, and I get there and I start putting my books on the shelves, and I turn around to get another book to put up there, and Renee, how much does one night in Salem cost? And I'm like, what? I literally just made a sale with my back turned. I couldn't believe it, but it was, it was like my best sale date ever, because I think everyone that had not been able to go to Salem the day before because it was raining and nor'eastering and just miserable. They were all there Sunday, so they were all there to have a good time, and our book booth was in the middle of it all, so everyone was like, hey, let's buy some cool horror books.
Well, that sounds terrific. So, that you were able to score some sales.
Yeah, that was.
So that is super. Describe maybe one of your stories, your supernatural stories that I think you just did, but any other particular ones stand out in your mind?
Right at this moment, I got a few here actually, and I got one of them. It's in this anthology, Secret Stairs. I don't know if you can see it there.
Okay.
It's this one was an Amazon, or I think it still is, one of the top-selling anthologies on Amazon.com, and it's based off the urban legend of the staircase in the forest, which is sort of a internet legend that's been making the rounds online, emails, forums, whatnot, and basically there's this staircase, usually of stone, somewhere out in a forest somewhere, and either the Park Service or some hikers or somebody will stumble across it and try to figure out why why this staircase is out there in the middle of nowhere and there's no building around it.
Yeah.
So what's going on here? So the one that I wrote in here is Grand Staircase to the Yellow Court, and it deals with this news photographer who's out in the woods taking some, artsy type shots, to sell in a gallery, and he's hiking with his niece who's into local legends and history and whatnot. So they get talking about, there's this legend, there's this staircase out here in the forest. And sure enough, they stumble across it, and
Wow. Yeah.
he starts taking pictures of the staircase and realizes when he gets home, there is something on the film that wasn't there. This strange figure
Uh-oh.
of a sort of king-like figure with a mask on its face, and it's like, what is going on here? So his niece gets interested and starts looking into the lore, and they start finding out, there is something very strange
Yes,
behind those
yes,
stairs,
yes.
and as to why those stairs are in the forest, it tees off from Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow stories, and just the whole strange mythos that surrounds that.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. And so you have some other books there
I've
that
got,
you are showing too. Yeah, you can hold them up,
Sure
and
thing.
we can zoom in on them
Okay.
later.
Sure thing. Okay, and speaking of New England horror writers, this is the anthology that I've been published in with them. This is, as you can see, Wicked Haunted. This was an anthology we put out not last October, but the October before, so October 2017. It was a ghost story anthology.
Oh, okay.
And,
Yeah.
all different ghost stories. A whole bunch of us submitted a piece to it, and the one that I have in here is the Stranding off Squeaking Point, which is I took the legend of the vanishing hitchhiker and sort of turned it on its head a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So deals with this girl who, this is like the 1860s. She's working on her granduncle's fishing boat in this little at this little fishing village up in Maine near Squeaking Point, and it's the end of the fishing season. She's out in her dory with one of the guys on the crew, and they're making their last catch, and they're about to go back to the mothership because the water's getting rough, and it's October or November, it's getting cold and wintry, so they start heading back to the ship, and they see something strange on a rock.
Wow.
And they have to find out what is going on here. Who is this guy that's stranded on this rock?
Ooh.
And
Yeah.
it just goes, it just unfolds from there, and it goes from just sort of a mundane moment to something extraordinary, which kind of expands into the girl's own sort of self-discovery, finding out, who she is and where she really comes from.
Nice. Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's
That's piques the imagination.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh?
This book in particular, I'm really proud of because this was shortlisted for a Bram Stoker Award, which is the Horror Writers Association's annual award, and we were shortlisted for Best Short Story Anthology,
Wow.
which
Yeah.
was really wonderful. I mean, we didn't make the award, but hey, we were on the short list, which is really quite an accomplishment.
Sure.
So yeah, this one I'm quite proud of.
That sounds great. And you have another.
I got another one. This one is especially interesting. This is Weird Book Magazine, which in some ways is kind of a spiritual successor to Weird Tales magazine, which was sort of a pulp fantasy, science fiction, horror, general kind of strange sort of fiction publication that was mostly, I think they started publishing it in like the 1920s, and it's best known because several great names in horror, including H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Bloch, I think Ray Bradbury, and a few others were published in it. So this one kind of is sort of the successor to that because it's kind of gone in and out of publishing, over the decades. I think it's lapsed back into, not being published for whatever reason. So, which is kind of sad. But we got this one,
Well,
which
it's,
is its successor, and this is issue number 38.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And which,
Where do they get the? I noticed there's some artwork on the front there.
yeah, they
so-
got they got an especially talented fantasy artist that works for them.
Nice.
It's,
Yeah.
it's kind of almost sort of Tolkien gone strange here. But the story that I wrote that they published here is, again, an H.P. Lovecraft story, The Handmaid of the Key, in which I kind of teed off from his story, The Dunwich Horror, which is one of my favorites of his stories. And I sort of took it from a different point of view. I mean, the story is basically told from sort of the outsider point of view, you know, the people of Dunwich who are kind of observing these strange things happening, and they're kind of side-eyeing this one family, the Whately clan, who are kind of a little odd. They're a little odd and a little strange, and they're up to some kind of weird cult sort of doings. But I decided to tell the story from the point of view of one of the family members, Lavinia Whately, who is sort of, I don't want to say she's the high priestess of the cult, but she's sort of one of the spiritual higher-ups in it. And she has these two strange little twin kids who may or may not be half alien.
Oh,
so yes, they're kind of an unusual lot, the Whateleys.
Yeah.
And this is basically her point of view. She's just having a quiet evening with her two strange little kids, and sure, they might be weird looking.
Yeah.
You know, her family might be doing some strange things up in the hills that, you know, are best left unsaid, but these are her kids. She loves them, you know? I mean, so what if they look strange? So what if one of them looks sort of like a half human, half goat sort of thing, and the other one I'm not even going to begin to describe. It's like, what the heck is that thing, lady, you know? But, you know,
very good.
She's just, you know, she loves her kids, and she's being a mom to them, so, you know.
So you have quite a lot of books that you have brought with you, and how many have you done all your books, including your anthologies?
Altogether, I have 25 stories in print.
Yes.
Yeah, and which I've published in like the last 4 or 5 years. So, and I got 4, possibly 5 more coming out this year in different books in different places. So,
yeah. Now, if people were to try to, do you have like an author's page that we can go to?
As a matter of fact, I have an author's page on Facebook. If you just type in R.C. Mulhare, it should pull it up, and I've got story announcements on there. I've got links to some of my books that you can buy online. I've got a few YouTube videos on there of me reading some of my stories, or just blithering about things that I'm up to, or
that sounds great.
Links to things that inspire me, pictures that have inspired me, a little bit of everything. So it's it's a pretty hopping page.
And you have a website too, or is that
That's basically my main presence. Although I'm also on Goodreads. You can also type R.C. Mulhare into Amazon.com. I'm putting together a WordPress page, but that's been kind of slow going because I'm still trying to figure out how does this page thing work, you know? So
sure.
It's kind of a writing blog, work in progress. So
sounds good. And so if people were to go to Amazon.com and type in your name, they'd come up with all your books.
Yep, they'd come up with my book list and my author page, which I've got a few goodies on there. So.
Well, that sounds great. Yeah. And they can see pictures also of each of your books on your author's page. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's quite a setup. When I first put the thing together, I got a little starstruck looking at it because I was like, "These are all my books. I wrote these things, or I wrote a piece that's in these things. Oh my gosh!" So.
That sounds super. Yeah. Now, if people wanted to get a hold of you, and you have an email on your Facebook that they can, or they.
You can message me through Facebook Messenger, or you can get me through Gmail at albanyphage@gmail.com.
Okay.
So
there's a couple of good places to go. Yeah. Very good. You had another book there that you were going to talk about.
Speaking of One Night in Salem, which I mentioned earlier, this is One Night in Salem.
Oh, neat.
Which is one that I'm especially proud of. This is another anthology from Fun Dead Publications, and the kind of trick that she had setting this up was all the stories are set in Salem, but they're all set on Halloween night in Salem, and each one is a different specific year. So you have historical stories with, the first Puritan fathers visiting in, the area that would become Salem, and it's, the 1600s, and they're finding out this area is very weird and there's strange things going on in the woods. Or there's another one that's like a Shirley Jackson-inspired story, and it's set in the 1950s, and it's this girl going trick-or-treating or something with her friends, and some strange things that happen as they're going out and about. And my story is set in the year 1991, which was the year of the perfect storm, or the no-name hurricane, as it's sometimes known in this area. And in this case, it's Halloween night. Haunted Happenings has been postponed because the weather is just too bad for people to be out and about on the streets. So the same news photographer from Grand Staircase of the Yellow Court, Carton Tillinghast is his name, he's trying to find something to take pictures of for the paper because he can't do Haunted Happenings pictures. So he meets up with a friend of his who's a Salem police officer, and he goes out on patrol with the police officer, and they're sitting in, the cop car down by the maritime historical site because they're trying to keep people from going down near the water because the surf is so dangerous and it's crashing over the shoreline into the street. So they're keeping an eye on it, and they're sitting there trading stories when they suddenly realize there is something strange blowing in on the storm.
Oh.
And it looks like a woman in distress, and they're trying to figure out why there is a woman flying on this storm, and who is she? It just kind of snowballs from there, and it's a very kind of an urban fantasy type story that I really had a blast writing.
That sounds true. All those stories sound so intriguing, and they would help. If I had them all, I'd spend the whole year looking at them.
Easily.
Those are super.
Thank you.
I think we have sort of come to the end of the program. We've been talking now for about 30 minutes.
Oh, cool.
And so is there anything else you'd like to add to our audience where the podcast will appear on WCTV TV and also on SoundCloud? So if people would try to get a hold of you, they could messenger you on Facebook, and also at your website, and also at your email. And I'm trying to think of anything else that you'd like to add.
No, you can also hit me up on Goodreads. I hang out on there quite regularly because if I'm not writing books, I'm reading them and talking about them on there. So
I noticed even on Goodreads that you you're reading quite a few of their books too from Goodreads.
Oh yeah,
and have left some comments on books that you saw on Goodreads.
Yeah.
So that's quite inspiring.
Authors got to help authors. We're all in this together, and
quite inspiring.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, very good. So I think that if you have anything else to say, fine. Not if not, I'm just going to come to a close here.
Well, for everyone who's out there, keep it spooky, and don't hesitate to say hello to the ghosts that you come across.
Yeah, I know. Well, thank you very much for
thank you for having me.
Being with us tonight at WCTV.org. Again, this is Mark's Musings, and we're very happy to have Renee with us and tell us about her books and her stories that are available. Don't forget to look them up on her author page at Amazon.com. So with that, we'd like to say goodbye for the night, and we'll see you next time.
I'll see you around, and keep it creepy.
Keep it creepy. Okay. Bye-bye now.